late autumn of the year of the reductive quokka, Crimsonian troops crossed into Maustria to lay siege to Revdenii. This city had passed to the control of the Grand Duchesses of Ubliko when the civil war began. Crimsonia wanted to recapture cities it had held in the past and hoped to spark democratic revolution. Ubliko saw this as an invasion and declared war. 2 months later, a Burgundii army occupied Tarmilt, the other Ublikon city controlled in the south. Ubliko declared war on the Burgundii. These wars became phony conflicts until Graf Klapkatsa, regent of Dunbara, led an expeditionary force to Zuren, causing trouble in the War of Prince Albrecht against the Northern League and resulting in the naval battle of Streech Island in late spring of the year of the Pensive Walrus. The Dunbaran and Ublikon fleets were defeated, and the war returned to its phony status. But first citizen Mausritz van Nassau was determined to bring the full strength of Crimsonia to Ubliko, defeat the Grand Duchess's army, and impose a peace treaty. To this end, a provision in the defeat of Zuren was added that allowed Crimsonian forces to pass through that land without obstacle. In mid-autumn, the army, commanded by Citizen General Blackcheddar, moved from Zuren through the Lamarca Pass to Ubliko proper, laying siege to Radka. Radka was heavily defended, and the Lamarca Pass notoriously unstable. Zurenese partisans, Ublikon agents, avalanches, raids of all kinds, the Crimsonians spent a miserable winter laying siege to the forts, reducing them one by one. Menathian infantry arrived to support their allies, and ultimately Prince Destrin declared that his nation was at war with Ubliko, not mere mercenaries. It is Menathian cheese that is used to bribe the garrison of the final fort in late spring of the year of the vigilant Pekingese. It takes over 6 months to capture Radka. In early summer, Blackcheddar led the combined army, now some 110,000 mice, towards Mariagerberg. The Grand Duchesses has not been idle. The city has been turned into a heavily fortified bastion, and the Ublikonese army and the generals Bleu and Renard number 50,000 mice under arms. Not bad for a small nation. The Grand Duchesses calls for allies, and the forces of loyalist Maustria under Countess Penella, with contingents from Dunbara and Tiplef-Nazin, moved north from Pvalhof to threaten Blackcheddar's supply lines with 60,000 mice. Penella and her famed cavalry division gave up pursuing royalist forces for this season and turned their attention to Ubliko, and more Dunbaran infantry arriving at Enitan and marching to join the armies. Blackcheddar falls back as the many armies of the nations gather south of the river Ublik. 50,000 Ublikonese, 30,000 Dunbarans, 10,000 Tiplef-Nazin mercenaries, and 26,000 Maustrian loyalists. A grand total of 116,000 troops, with an astounding 30,000 cavalry mice and 6 artillery brigades. Command of this army is given to Graf Klapkatsa, regent of Dunbara. This former Maustrian general has been the organizing agent behind the entire enterprise, and as a head of state he technically outranks all the other contenders. The Grand Duchesses does not take the field, but remains ensconced behind the walls of Mariagerberg. The combined forces are the army of the Grand Alliance. In midsummer, the scene is set for a great battle of manoeuvre. The two sides are roughly matched in strength, but Blackcheddar has one great advantage. The river Ublik lies between his army and the Grand Alliance. Klapkatsa will need to cross if he intends to bring the united powers of Crimsonia and Manath to battle. There are several crossing points open to Klapkatsa. He could move the entire army back to Mariagerberg and make a deliberate advance on the northern side, or he could march south of the river and cross between Radka and the Lamarca Pass, cutting Blackcheddar off from his supply lines. Or he could cross directly opposite Radka and bring the fight to the enemy. But in the Great Council of War, Klapkatsa decides to cross the river at the 2 bridges downstream of Radka, at the villages of Rensin and Rukan. Klapkatsa has decided to cross the river Ublik at 2 bridges downstream of Radka, at the villages of Rensin and Rukan. On Cheddin's Day, Grand Alliance scouts report that these crossings are undefended. The United Powers forces are around Radka. Graf Klapkatsa issues his orders, and Penella's cavalry crosses the Ublik at Rensin, while the Tiplef-Nazin mercenaries and a Dunbaran division cross at Rukan, with Ublikonese troops in support. The bulk of Klapkatsa's force is held in reserve, south of the river. The Graf is convinced the Blackcheddar will cross the river at Radka and attack his position. His repeated orders are for the army to act defensively and cautiously, and is explicit particularly with Countess Penella about keeping the cavalry intact. But Klapkatsa is mistaken. Blackcheddar has no intention of crossing the river. Instead, he intends to mass his force against any individual crossing force and eliminate it with extreme prejudice. When reports reach Blackcheddar that forces are crossing the Ublik at Rensin, orders go out that will have the entire army concentrate at that village in a matter of hours. But the crossing at Rensin is only Penella's cavalry. The other Grand Alliance troops in the area concentrate on the southern side of the river and assume defensive positions. Crimsonians are concentrating at a crossing point that has not been crossed. Clapcatzer sends a Dunbaran cavalry division towards Batwitz to scout Crimsonian positions, but discovers only the fort and its garrison protecting the city. The rest of the United Powers army has marched away, and about half the Grand Alliance army has remained in place, waiting in reserve for an attack that has not come. In overnight councils, Blackcheddar communicates to all of his divisions that he wishes to concentrate the entire army on the Rukan crossing point. Only 1st Division, a formation of mostly militia and with no artillery, are to be left to guard the Rensin Bridge. Clapcatzer meanwhile orders his army to concentrate in 2 places, some divisions to mass near the Rensin Bridge and attack if practical, while the rest of the army will march to Rukan and defend the crossing, or attempt to retreat to the south. Clapcatzer will himself ride to the west and command at Rukan. The 2 crossing points are 15 hours of marching apart on the south side of the river due to poor roads and difficult terrain. On the north side, they are only 9 hours march apart. At midday, the Crimsonian Cavalry Division has arrived at the crossroads north of Rukan, with 3rd Division coming up in support, while 4th Division has marched to a village east of Rukan and then halted, awaiting the arrival of 6th Division coming up behind. Blackcheddar is furious that 4th Division have not followed his direction correctly, and issues a dispatch ordering the attack, and forward the Red Line's advance. By 2 p.m. the Crimsonian cavalry is menacing Clapcatzer's left flank, where the tip-left Nazine infantry are trying to pull back to the bridge. An Ublikon cavalry division has arrived at the far side, but Clapcatzer orders them to remain where they are. There is already enough at risk on this side of the Ublik. The Crimsonian infantry launches a series of direct attacks on the Dunbaran and Ublikon infantry, who respond with fierce volleys. At 3 p.m. the Crimsonian cavalry charges Dunbaran infantry that are trying to cross the bridge. One brigade breaks on the enemy squares, but another gets through, shatters the infantry, and pursues into another brigade, which hold their ground. The Crimsonian infantry pushes forward with cavalry in support and secures the northern bridgehead. Most of the tip-left Nazine and half of the Dunbaran division have escaped to the south, but the Ublikon 1st Division is trapped on the northern side. They fight on for a little longer, but eventually throw down their muskets and surrender on the edge of a swamp. By 4 p.m. Clapcatzer's army has lost 18,000 soldiers, killed and wounded, but mostly prisoners. At about this time, news arrives from the Duc de Laurier, commanding the Moustrian loyalists at Rensin. He reports that his division is exhausted from crossing the river, but that his force is across, with Ublikon and Dunbaran divisions moving to support. The Crimsonian 1st Division has been destroyed. Clapcatzer issues some hasty orders to the nearby officers and rides to Rensin as fast as his mount can carry him. The Duc de Laurier's report is a little hasty, but by 4 p.m. the Dunbaran and Ublikon troops are across the river and marching northwest to get into the Crimsonian rear and cut their line of retreat to Radka, and hopefully find the Countess Penella and her cavalry, who have been missing for a whole day. Penella's division crossed at Rensin the previous day, and then to the village of Pvalhof, where contact was made with the forces that crossed at Rukan, before heading northeast and out of all knowledge, or at least towards the village of Kolpin. How differently the battle at Rukan would have been the following day if Penella had stayed to defend that crossing point is idle speculation. On the Wednesday, the Loyalist cavalry moved back towards Pvalhof, arriving around 8 a.m., but find it held strongly by the Crimsonians. So Penella turns her columns around, back towards Kolpin, and then southeast, parallel, but opposite to the concentrating Crimsonian columns. At about 3 p.m., as the battle at Rukan is coming to its crescendo, Penella's scouts report Crimsonian columns marching west through the crossroads village of Pvalhof. The cavalry division begins to deploy to attack. The enemy are the Crimsonian 6th Division, a mixed force of cavalry and infantry who take steps to defend the crossroads and send dispatches to Blackcheddar reporting the presence of Loyalist cavalry. Neither side is prepared to force an engagement this late in the day, but by 6 p.m. both armies are aware of the standoff at the Pvalhof crossroads, and both armies are marching to concentrate here. At 7 p.m. Penella receives 2 courier messages. One is from the commander of the Manathian division, now marching towards Pvalhof, calling for her surrender and promising good terms. The other is from Clapcatzer, ordering Penella to fall back to the bridgehead at Rensin. Penella ignores both. She can see the clouds of dust rising from the Ublikon infantry marching towards the crossroads from the southeast. And at 8 p.m., in the gathering darkness, Clapcatzer arrives, bringing the Duc de Laurier to survey the field and make a plan for the morning's battle. Of course, Blackcheddar has been in Pvalhof since 5 p.m. and is making battle plans of his own.